Hello, welcome to my channel. This is my first ever video tutorial on how to draw and design your own Twitch emotes. I will leave a list of links in the description of what I use to draw these emotes. I use an iPad Pro with an Apple Pen as well as Procreate. I did use an iPad Air for a really long time, so it's definitely doable to draw these on an iPad Air. Plus, it's more affordable on an iPad Air too. Okay, let's get started. For canvas size, I usually do a 500 by 500 pixel image with 300 dpi. This is because I find that is the best quality even if you resize down to fit the emote requirements on Twitch. On Procreate, you can set preset canvases, and so I'm renaming this one to a Twitch emote canvas, and I can just reuse this setting for future drawings. One thing to keep in mind for digital art is to have different parts of your image on different layers. Procreate lets you have a set number of layers depending on the size of your file, but the way to think about it is any different aspect of your image or design should be on a different layer. So sketch, new layer, line art is a new layer, color, base color, new layer, shadows, new layer. Anything you can think of that would be a different component, you'd want it on a different layer because it just makes your life easier when you go back and change things later. It is generally good practice to name your layers. I don't do that normally, but I'll try my best in this tutorial to do that. For brushes, I have left the links in the description box below for you to take a look at. I usually jump between this free brush that I found online and Jing Sketch Basics. I also sometimes use one of the brush sets that my friend made, so you can go check those out. For brushes, it ultimately depends on your style, so you'll need to try a bunch of different ones just to see which one you feel like is easier for you to use or suits the design and feel that you're trying to go for a lot better. For this specific tutorial, I'm going to create a pog emote. So this is one of the emotes that I've created for my own channel, but I'm going to show you how I conceptualize and design this emote from scratch. You can get a lot of good emote ideas from Google. I wouldn't copy and paste other people's designs, but I would use it as a reference point for the type of expression or placement that you would like for your emote to be in. Especially if it's your first one, it's really helpful to have a reference. So for my sketch, I usually start with a circle and then I will lay down the eyes, the shape of the face, where the ears will be, and figuring out where I want other features of the face to lie and what I want to emphasize. And so it just helps me figure out what I want my emote to look like before I start doing the line art. Also, a quick disclaimer, I don't actually draw this fast, and these clips are sped up to like 5 or 6 times the original speed. The entire process of drawing this emote actually took me 2 hours, but having a 2-hour tutorial is way too long for anyone to sit through, so for most of the part where I'm just drawing, I did speed it up for this video. Before I start doing my line art, I usually change the opacity of my sketch layer down from 100% to somewhere between 30 to 40%. Just so that I have this outline of my rough sketch to follow as a reference point. It's completely up to you if you want to do that, but I find it really helpful to have that as a guide. I usually go for a darker brown color to do my outline, and I find that it actually helps make the line a little softer, but it's up to you what color you want to use. This is just something that I do that I find quite nice for my emote drawings. Something that's unique with emote designs is that you want to make sure your outline and features that you want to emphasize stand out, and one of the ways to do so is to make sure that your line art is thick, like double C thick. So you'd have to play around with the thickness of the brush that you're using. I would usually use the free brush that I linked in my description. You can use any brush to achieve the look that you want, as long as you make sure the features that you want to stand out, especially the outline of the emote, is thick enough so that when you zoom out to a really small size, you can still see the shape of that emote design. Last but not least, don't forget to make sure you're on the right layer before you start doing your line art. It's the worst when you have it on the wrong layer and you've done all this work already, so always check to make sure that you're on that right layer. Saves you so much pain. So I'll periodically zoom out of my image to make it really tiny so I can see what parts I need to emphasize better with my line art. For example, if these bangs need to be that detailed or if they need to be more simple, because when it's really small, you're not really going to see any of the details. So that's just a way for me to check and make sure that I have just the right amount of detail for my emote design. So sometimes when I do my line art, it might take me 2 tries instead of getting the perfect line art the first try. And this could just be because I feel like the size of the image is too small or the proportion doesn't feel right. So after I line it the first time, I'll adjust it a bit. So for this one, I'm just resizing it to make the face a bit bigger. For an emote, I don't think the body of the emote is too important. So that's why I'm actually happy with just cutting off part of the body and being able to emphasize the face and the head a lot more. And I end up having to redo my line art because whenever you zoom in into a drawing that you did on Procreate, it makes your line art look a little more pixelated, and I usually don't like the way that looks, and so I just end up relining it so that the lines are a lot cleaner. So I'm just going to speed up this part by a lot because it took me some time while I was drawing this to be a little more detailed and careful with what parts I wanted to emphasize, and you can still see the progress of my design even at like 12 times speed. If you ever want a slower drawing process video or a slower emote design video, let me know in the comments, and I'm more than happy to create videos where these are slowed down and so you can see a more realistic version of how long it actually takes to draw an emote from start to finish. Okay, so now that the line art is done, we can actually move on to a more fun part-ish, which is adding our base colors to different parts of our drawing. So you could have a layer for hair, and this is where multiple layers will come in handy, and it will save your life. So make sure you have those layers. So you can have one for your hair, skin color, eyes, mouth, and clothing. For me, I personally go for more muted tones when I apply my base layer, and then when I do the shadowing and I add highlights, that's where I would add more of a warmer tone or a cooler tone if I feel like some adjustments need to be made. Otherwise, I usually play around with the colors that I have until I find a color that I like. With Procreate, you can easily outline the parts that you want to color and then drag the color down to the part that you outlined, so you don't have to actually color with your pencil or finger the entire area that you want to color. So all you need to do is just go around the edge of the parts that you would like to have that color, and then you drag and drop that color into the spots that you want it to be filled, and it saves you so much more time doing this way. You could also do the reference layer method, but sometimes if you have gaps in your line art, then it doesn't actually fill the way that you want it to. So I find that this way is still the best method for me when it comes to laying down the base colors. If you have a part that you want to show up on top of another color, for example like the eyes being on top of the skin, just make sure your eye layer for the base color is on top of the skin layer. Otherwise, if it's the other way around, that eye color will be covered by the skin layer, so you won't see the color that you put down. So order of layers will also be important to keep in mind as well. How I do shading is I create this new layer and then I create a clipping mask on top of the layer that I'm trying to shade. So if I am shading the hair, then I'll create a clipping mask on top of that hair layer, and then I would change the opacity of that layer to somewhere between 40 to 50%, and instead of having the normal layer setting on Procreate, I would change it to multiply, so that I can use the same color as what I use for my hair, but it will show up in a darker shade, so that it actually saves you a bit of time trying to find the color. This is one of the tricks that I really enjoyed when I learned it, so I hope that you're able to use this trick when you design your emote drawings as well. One tip I have is to not overdo your shadows or highlights. Keep it simple. You can't see them when they're that small, and you only want it to emphasize the emote, so make them as sharp as you can. And then if you want to add on other layers of shadows, then just create a duplicate of the clipping layer that you made and change the opacity, or you can use a different shade of gray or the darker color of your base layer, and that would just make your life easier because the clipping mask won't affect your actual base layer color. I think one of the most painful things about drawing digital art is when you do your shadows and highlights on your base color layer and you're not able to modify those layers individually, so having them separated will save you so much time and so many headaches. So just make sure that when you're shading and doing highlights that they're on different layers. For highlights specifically, I usually use the same clipping mask layer, or a different layer, but instead of using multiply, I change the layer setting to add, because I feel like it just makes the color pop out so much more. So usually I use a light yellow or pastel yellow color, and then I would create another clipping mask layer with the same setting, but instead of yellow I would use white, just to create a softer highlight effect. It kind of gives it a nice glow, which I really like. So I'm just going to repeat the shadowing and highlight process for the skin, eyes, mouth, and other parts of this emote design. If you want to hang out and just watch the whole process, that's amazing. Thank you so much. If not, you can just go ahead and skip all the way to where I show you how you can copy this design onto different size requirements for Twitch, and then how I upload my emote designs onto Twitch to save myself a little bit of time from waiting for Twitch to process and reconfigure that design to match their settings. One of the final touches that I really like adding to my emote design is adding highlights to the line art. So I do the same thing where I create a clipping mask with the layer mode as add, and then I change the opacity down. I usually use a red color first because I feel like this is closer to the skin color, so it does make for a nicer transition between the skin color to the line art. And then I would use a different layer and I would add yellow or white highlights to give it a more glowy effect at the end, which is what I'm doing right now. It's something small, but it makes such a huge difference when you zoom in and out of your emote design, and on a darker background, this kind of highlight does really stand out. What I'm doing now is just checking to make sure that the qualities and characteristics of my design are emphasized further. So just outlining the eyes again, and then I'll outline the outer line art to make sure it's just a little bit thicker. That way when you zoom out you can see the mouth and the eyes and the actual emote a lot more clearly. Okay, so I'm going to create 3 new canvases in these specific sizes. It's going to be 112 pixels, 56 pixels, and 28 pixels. And these are the 3 required sizes that Twitch will resize your emotes to. So how we're going to copy our emote design onto these canvases is we're actually going to go straight into our settings, and then we will go into the add and then copy canvas section. We're going to click onto a new canvas and then just paste it in and repeat for the other 2 canvases. What I usually do is I would zoom out of these smaller canvases as well, just to make sure that the pixels aren't resizing wonky or funny, and then I would repeat and double check for all the other different canvases as well. So the reason behind this is these are the required sizes for you to manually upload your emotes onto Twitch, and it actually saves you time. Instead of having to wait for Twitch to resize your designs for you, you can upload these preset sizes that they have, and generally I find that my emotes are approved in a lot shorter time period than if I were to wait for Twitch to resize it for me. So what you're going to do now that your design is done and you have the 3 different sizes is you're going to go onto Twitch and you're going to go to your emote section and click on add a new emote, and then you're going to uncheck auto resize and upload the 3 sizes that we've just prepared, and then you can update the prefix to whatever you want, and then upload that design for Twitch. And it also shows you what it looks like on a light background as well as a dark background. And that's it for this tutorial. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please hit the like and subscribe button and leave in the comments below on what you would like to see next for tutorials. If you have something specific that you'd like me to cover relating to Twitch emotes, or just to see my process for drawing other emotes with other kinds of expressions. See you next time and stay cozy, friends!